And so I meet so many people who say, well, I can't afford this, I can't afford that, I can't afford to buy real estate, I can't afford to buy Bitcoin, I can't afford to buy. Well, the reason you can't afford to buy something is because you can't sell. And sales equals income. So back in 1974, my dad wanted me to go to the University of Hawaii and get my PhD. And I said, no, or he wanted to fly for the airlines because I was a pilot. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to learn how to sell. And he was upset. He says, salesmen are crooks, they're con artists. It's not a very honorable profession. But that's why he was poor. So many PhD types, academic types, they think they're above the capitalist process. They think their PhD entitles them to the better life. But if you go for your PhD, you really don't have the skill sets to be in the capitalist world. Like when my father, bless his heart, he ran for lieutenant governor against his boss, the governor, as a Republican in the People's Republic of Hawaii. Hawaii's 100% communist. And so he ran as a Republican and he lost. And the governor said to him, you'll never work in this state again. So the power the governor had over my dad was his job. And the hardest thing for a school teacher, Patrick, is as a capitalist, you really don't need a school teacher. You need a salesman. And my father just couldn't sell. He wouldn't, he just kept holding up his PhD. I have a PhD, but he couldn't sell.
Wow.
And you know what I mean? And I saw that. And that's when my rich dad, who had no education at all, said, you better learn how to sell pretty quickly. So I was at your birthday party and I saw your team, both men and women, what they have is confidence. And that confidence, ability to sell, to communicate and all that, that'll carry them into the future. And what's going to happen is as the economy worsens and they keep stealing our freedoms, they're going to have the income via which you take advantage of real estate, of whatever Bitcoin, whatever they want to invest in. But if you can't sell, remember, sales equals income. And if you can't sell, you don't have income. I mean, is that direct a process? But when I sat down with my poor dad, he just couldn't hear it. He said, salesmen are crooks. They deceive people, they cheat people and all this. But that's what prevented him from getting ahead. When I was a kid, I couldn't listen to my poor dad anymore because I was really horrible in school anyway. And they kept saying, well, if you don't get good grades, you won't get a good job. I said, good, I'm on the right track. And then, so I would play Monopoly with my rich dad, but I had to work for him for free. That was the deal. And he says, if I pay you money, you think like an employee. So I would work for him for free, and then he'd play Monopoly and teach me. So as I got older, when I was about 12 years old, he says, okay, your graduate course is this. I had to go to he had a lot of rental units. He called them rental units. My poor dad, the school teacher, called them slums, And I think, the formula, Patrick, is the real estate buys the land. So rich dad was putting up these military Quonset huts on this really great land. But the Quonset huts, the military were buying the land. So he put these little cheap ass Quonset huts up there. And my poor dad went nuts. He went, oh, how dare you do that? He's taking advantage of all these people. He's a complete Marxist socialist. So when I was about 12, rich dad says, okay, we played enough Monopoly. You're going to graduate. And so the next graduation course was I had to go knock on doors and collect rent. I tell you, Patrick, I learned more about life knocking on doors,
wow,
collecting rent, because everybody who was late in their payments had an excuse. They all had a TV set. I could hear it going in the background. They weren't working, and they didn't pay their rent. It was one of the best educations I ever had.
I can only imagine.
Oh my God, at 12 years old.
Wow.
And so that kind of, that also twisted my path because my poor dad had excuses too, if you know what I mean. I heard similar excuses collecting rent from these very, very poor people. And I heard the same excuses at home. And so that's why when Rich Dad said to me, when I came back from the Marine Corps, he said, you better learn how to sell. I didn't want to do it because nobody likes rejection. Everybody hates rejection. Entrepreneurs must know about money. Employees don't. It was like a big, big lesson. So the next lesson was this. So I got this job at Xerox, the same story you have is I got my little handy dandy sales planner up. I'm dying. Let's say there's 20 sales guys at the Xerox branch in Honolulu. I'm dying. I mean, I'm like, and this guy Sanchez flies in from Western Region, Santa Ana. He looks at my sales thing, and I got all these appointments, but no sales. And I'm going to get fired. So I said, I can't. I'm working hard, but I'm going to get fired. Because I had no sales. So I go. My Rich Dad's office was at Waikiki, so I go to Rich Dad's office and I show him my planner. He looks at it. He goes, "Okay." He says, "Let me ask you this. How many, I had to knock on doors. I had no established accounts. The FNGs and the FNU guy has to always cold call. That's as brutal as it comes. So I'm cold calling in Honolulu. I'm getting nowhere, but I'm making a lot of cold calls. So I show my Rich Dad my sales planner, just like you do with your guys. And I said, my Rich Dad says, well, it's obviously why you're failing. I said, why is that? He says, you're not failing enough. He says, if you want to become successful, you have to step up your failure rate. I went, what? Because in my poor dad's family, the academics family, PhDs and all this, failure means you're not successful. And to my rich dad, failure meant you were getting successful. So his advice to me, and I'm working for Xerox, I'm probably 28 years old. He goes, you got to step up your failure rate. Find a way to fail faster. So that's when you get creative. I can only make so many sales calls a day. So what I would do at night, let's say I left downtown Honolulu at 5, I would go to this nonprofit organization up the street and I would dial for dollars. So I could make 30 sales calls in a night. And I didn't care if I failed or, I was just dialing to get people to donate money for this charity. And I failed 30 times a night. And I kept failing 30 times. That was my goal, fail 30 times a night. But you know what happened, Patrick? My sales at Xerox went up.